Welcome to Bold Voices, Good Yarns. I'm your host, Ian Henzel. Behind every book lies an author's life story. So join me on an interactive journey as we step between the pages to explore how an author's life and their experiences have shaped the stories that we cherish and love. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe or a cocktail, and join me as we step between the pages. Hello, everyone. Here we are once again. I'm Ian Henzel, and I'm the host here at Bold Voices, Good Yarns. So we're going to be delving into the life of another author. So grab a cup of joe or cocktail, make yourself comfortable, because we're going to be stepping between the pages of the life of author Russell J. Sanders. Hi, Russell.
Yeah.
Welcome. It's good to have you on the show. And one of Russell's books here, I'm going to hold up, I have a physical copy, is An Angry God, which is a fantastic book. And it's all about a serial killer who's going after young gay men and a rather despicable clergyman who is encouraging the serial killer. And Russell, you have two new books out, don't you? What are those?
Well, one of them came out couple of months ago. It's called The Secret, and it's
Hello, everyone. Here we are once again. I'm Ian Henzel, and I'm the host here at Bold Voices, Good Yarns. So we're going to be delving into the life of another author. So grab a cup of joe or cocktail, make yourself comfortable, because we're going to be stepping between the pages of the life of author Russell J. Sanders. Hi, Russell.
Yeah.
Welcome. It's good to have you on the show. And one of Russell's books here, I'm going to hold up, I have a physical copy, is An Angry God, which is a fantastic book. And it's all about a serial killer who's going after young gay men and a rather despicable clergyman who is encouraging the serial killer. And Russell, you have two new books out, don't you? What are those?
Well, one of them came out couple of months ago. It's called The Secret, and it's a tale of a young high schooler who's actually 19 years old because it's set in Texas, and in Texas, if your birthday doesn't fall right, you can be pretty old when you graduate high school. And he's like the star of the show at his school. He's a big drama guy, but he leads a very secret life and doesn't want anybody, not even the boy he's in love with, to know what's going on in his life.
And what's your other new book?
The other book is called Bud. And
Bud.
It is a transgender love story. The tale of Shelley Sheridan, a young ballet dancer who is forced to live with an uncle that he has never met. And I say he, but Shelley actually is a she and doesn't know it. Shelley lived, of course, born in a boy's body, but he soon finds out or decides that he is transgender. And it is the story of this lovely transition, plus all the problems that arise as a young person transitions into what they really are and how they should live their lives.
Well, we're going to take a turn now from your characters' lives to your life, because this is all about stepping between the page. I feel like we should have "This is your life," but stepping between the pages of your life. So can you tell us a bit about, you grew up in Texas, right?
I did.
And we were talking in kind of off camera, we were talking, you grew up, your formative years were in the 60s, were your school years. Can you talk about your upbringing and how that shaped your worldview?
Well, first of all, I'm a Texan through and through. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada now, but I lived most of my life in Texas. And I grew up in North Texas in a tiny suburb of Fort Worth, Texas, called Halton City. It definitely was a separate little city, but it was just part of Fort Worth. And that's what I've always told people, is that I grew up in Fort Worth. My parents were just normal, middle class people. My dad worked hard. He was always accepting any overtime because he had three boys to raise and he wanted us to have a good life. My mother also worked, and she worked not only because it helped the family, but she just loved to work. I came from this very strong work ethic. Oddly enough, my older brother, my younger brother, constantly never stopped working and everything, and I never liked working. And I loved my career. My career initially was as a teacher. I absolutely adored it. I loved every minute of it, but I didn't like that alarm clock that got me up every morning and told me that I had to get dressed and go to work. But anyway, I was in school with, well, most of the people I graduated with were people I started school with. We had a few other schools fed into the high school, but mostly I knew the same people for 12 years. I was not an outgoing child. I loved adults more than anybody, and I loved reading. My mother had a book in her hand all the time. And what amazed me was that she could keep stories straight from 4 and 5 books that she was reading at the same time, because she didn't want to be without one, didn't want to carry one around, so there would be one in the car and one at her bedside. Wherever she was, there was a book.
So what role did reading play in informing you? And were there any authors that were prime influences on you?
I'm not sure there were authors that were prime influences on me, but it was the books themselves. Because my mother didn't care what I read, and she knew that I was reading constantly. My favorite story was sixth grade, when our sixth grade teacher said that she wanted to approve every book that we read outside of class. I took her 2 or 3 books that I was reading, and finally she just kind of threw up her hands and said, "You don't have to bring me anymore," because they were not typical sixth grader books. I remember a 7th grade teacher, we're having silent reading, and I encountered a word, fertility god. That was in the book I was reading, and so out loud I asked the teacher, "Ma'am, what's a fertility god?" And she said, "What are you reading?"
So, I'm sorry, I think Texas, it's probably my own prejudice. I think conservatism, think something kind of very focused on the church. And I mean, became a teacher and you're also gay. Was there that struggle between your inner self and the larger environment around you?
What's very strange is my life was those books. I had lots of friends when I was in school, but none of them were the kind that would call me up and say, "Hey, let's go to a movie," or, "Let's go to a football game." I went for one in high school only. I was caught up in my book, and I read, and that was my world. Whereas I know that it broadened my whole perspective of the world. I didn't really know when I was in high school what was going on around me. I was smart, so I knew that we had the Vietnam War going around, and of course I didn't particularly want to fight in that. I knew that there were something called hippies in the world, but I didn't know what that was all about in the peace movement. And of course, with the hippie movement, it eventually bled into the women's movement and the gay rights movement and whatever. The 1960s are the most influential part of our history, I think.
Do you think in a way that books insulated you from the real world?
Possibly. I really think they did. Because I was very controlled, and yet I had dreams that were probably bigger than a lot of my classmates. I dreamed of being a Broadway star. And maybe because I was lost in a fantasy world of books, learning and growing and understanding the world better, I was still so insular and so socially inept that I didn't make myself achieve that dream.
It's kind of interesting to me that when you talk about reading and your world of books, at least in my mind's eye, I see something in Technicolor. It's kind of like The Wizard of Oz. And when we shift back to school and Texas, it's in black and white. So I don't know if I'm wrong, because you seem to come alive when you are talking about books. And it sounds like that was stimulation and maybe possibilities that could exist as alternatives to what you were seeing.
I think so. I mean, picture this. My dad's company had at one point a big company picnic at a park. And everybody brought their wives and their children, and there was a playground and food, and it was just wonderful. And kids just running around and playing with everybody. And I bet I was 10 I had to be about 11 years old. And I sat in a swing on the playground reading Auntie Mame. And
wow, Auntie Mame, talk about colorful.
And I was reading Auntie Mame. And how I know it's 11, I was 11, that came out in 1958, unless I'm wrong. But I remember it was Auntie Mame I was reading. And that was the thing. I read one of my favorite musicals at the time was Rodgers and Hammerstein's Flower Drum Song, which had just come out in 58. I read the source book, loved it, thought it was wonderful. Later in college, I read it again, and I thought, this is kind of a racy book. But I didn't know that when I was in sixth grade. And then I read it again recently, and I thought, there is so much of this book that I missed those first two readings.
Do you think, let me ask you this, because you write really young adult and new adult books. Is that what inspires you to write for those readers that, and your books can be read by adults. So I know I've read An Angry God, and it's a book I think any adult would enjoy. But do you think that part of you wants to give that to young adults and new adult readers?
I think that's possibly true. I write young adult and new adult books because I know the psyche of teenagers. You can't teach for as long as I did and not become intimately familiar with the way they act and react and understand things. I think that you could possibly say I have stunted growth as well. Maybe I'm still lost back then. But yeah,
let me ask you this, and this is really kind of a left field question. When you're sitting and writing, okay, we have who we are. We have a physical age, our chronological age. But if you had to think about how old you are when you're writing, how old would you say you are? Is that who you are now, or is that?
Definitely not as old as I am now. But I also don't think unless it's dialogue from a teenager, I don't think with a teenager. When I write, I want to tell the best story I can on a level that can not only enrich, but inform and make people grow in their outlook. And that's why my stories are all feature teenage main characters, but the subject matter is things that teens probably rarely encounter, and if they do, they either don't understand what's going on, or it's something that they've never really thought about. Because I write about really intense subjects, I guess. Chance is the best word I can think of right now.
Have you ever thought about writing for an older audience? So let me kind of preface where I'm coming from. We had on one of our podcasts, we had an author who she wrote a memoir at about 85. She's now 86. And have you ever thought of taking what you do and applying that to older characters? Because there's a whole different phase of life.
Don't think I have the confidence to do it. I don't think that I feel like I could speak to adults in the way that I feel like I speak to teens. And yet, I think that adults can read my books and be very pleased with them and enjoy them and learn from them. And in fact, I've had many comments from adults that have said something to the effect that this is not a teenage book.
No, I don't think An Angry God is necessarily, I don't think of it as a teenage book. It's dealing with some very, very real, the dangers of the world. And the world can be a dangerous place. And for certainly young LGBT people, but for older LGBT people like ourselves, I think the difference is with age, we sometimes can get to choose where we live and who we're with and who we associate with. And we don't necessarily have that same kind of freedom when we're younger. So let's do a pivot. And I want to ask you a question that I ask every one of our guests, and eager to hear your answer. So if when an author creates a book, they create a world. And there are some books that we might love, and it might be like Dickens' A Bleak House, but would we want to live there? So if you could live in a book, what book would you live in?
That is a great question. I heard you ask that question on a previous podcast, and my first reaction was, oh gosh, I hope he doesn't ask me that, because I'd never ever thought about it. But then I got to thinking, and I thought, there are so many books I've read that I didn't want to end because I was living in that world and I wanted to continue living with those people. So I was thinking and thinking some more. And what I came up with that sort of embodies my entire life in a nutshell is Edna Ferber's Showboat. I mean, wow. I would love to have plied the rivers of the Mississippi on this lazy showboat, and I'm romanticizing this lazy showboat going down the river and being a performer, singing songs and playing scenes, and the audiences being so hungry for entertainment that they didn't even doubt that I was not the finest performer in the world. I could be a star on the showboat.
So you'd be that vagabond actor on the showboat.
It would just be the life to be a star on the wicked stage, as they say, in the musical showboat. In reality, that boat, there are lots of problems on that showboat, and it wasn't the wonderful showing place. But just romantically speaking, I think it would be so much fun to lead that life and to know those characters, to get to meet the characters that are in the book. That's my answer to the question. You ask me tomorrow, I'm going to have a different book that I would like to be in.
Edna Ferber's Showboat. Well, it always amazes me. I'm always surprised because I never know what the person I'm interviewing is going to say. And I think it's interesting what people pick. And there certainly is a romantic quality to that showboat life. There's also a dark side to it. But I mean, you're focusing on just that whole quality of going from town to town, being bigger than life, mounting being on stage and moving on.
I think that is my life now. Now, of course, in my life, I have been a singer, I have been an actor, I've worked in the theater, and I don't now and haven't for years. But I like being the center of attention. And I kick myself after like a dinner party or a meeting with someone when I realize that I've done all the talking and I have not asked questions like, well, what's your life like? Or when did you two meet? And all of that. And so to me, the showboat life would probably be perfect.
Well, I'm so glad that we could put you in the spotlight today.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for being on our show, and I hope that we can have you on again. So once again, my name is Ian Henzel, and we've been here on Bold Voices, Good Yarn, stepping between the pages of the life of author Russell J. Sanders. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on various channels on social media. Everything about Russell's books will be in the show notes below. So join us again next time on Bold Voices, Good Yarns. And thank you again, Russell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Bold Voices, Good Yarns, brought to you by Rattling Good Yarns Press. Subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube, and follow us on social media. Search for Rattling Good Yarns Press. Also, visit our website at rattlinggoodyarns.com, where you can find great reads and interesting articles about the world of books. See you soon!